So, Aaron, where do you believe that your, entrepreneurial mindset began? Because I know that you were very young when that started. So maybe just talk about that a little bit.
I think the earliest memory I have is probably when we went to our neighbors, the Wards, into their flower bed where they had the river rocks, and thinking, gosh, this might be a great idea to break some open, be boys, and see what's inside of them. What's the coolest looking rock, and then go around the neighborhood and start selling them. Cute little kids selling rocks, and it actually worked for us. I think made a couple bucks.
Yeah, no, I remember that too. And I remember I found one rock that was like in mud, and I broke it open. And I thought I hit the jackpot because literally there was like all these crystals. So I remember doing that with my brother, and it's just kind of funny that we would, take rocks from our neighbors and then sell them right back to them. So it's funny, but it worked. And I think that's like that was a valuable lesson for you, and us as in general on how to start a business. And so, yeah, no, I think that's hilarious. I do remember that. So,
yeah, I mean, we're essentially stealing from our neighbors and selling it, but whatever. We didn't know any different. And then, I mean, we had youth baseball selling candy bars for fundraising and stuff like that. There's another early entrepreneurial venture, I guess, in a way, selling concessions, running a concession stand in grade school at basketball games, seeing the importance of money in, money out type of thing, even though we didn't have a very strong concept of that at an early age, but you could see it happening before you. Went through high school. I don't think I really, other than working at Nick and Willie's, a pizza place, and I didn't really have much of a entrepreneurial venture then, but getting into college is kind of when it really started developing. I always knew I wanted to go into business. Went to St. Olaf in 2003, and the closest degree they had to business was economics. So I went that route. Did some management studies actually too, so I had some accounting background, and then took actually an entrepreneurial J-term class in the month of January. It was my junior year, and it was really cool. We got to actually develop a business, write a business plan with two other business partners, and then run that business eventually. And we decided on doing a thrift resale called Thrift Ninja.
That's
so we would go to thrift stores. I had a business partner who was really interested in design and stuff, and then and one other one, and it was really kind of cool. We developed a logo, and then we'd go up to the Twin Cities. And he, my one business partner who would love design, Sean, he had a great eye for what to buy and what to look for and stuff. So bought a bunch of stuff. I think we got a grant from the school, so we were able to start that with the seed money. And then we would resell stuff on eBay.
Gosh, that's kind of ahead of your time.
A little bit, yeah.
That probably would have been, because I remember I was there, so that would have been your senior year probably, was it? Do you think? Or your junior year?
I think it was either junior or senior.
I remember that. Yeah. No, that's cool.
So we did that. And
did you guys continue that? Because did you try
just
to
for a little
bit?
bit? Yeah, we tried to. Yeah, it was, we all kind of went our separate ways after college, so it didn't really last. But it was a really good introduction, I guess, into entrepreneurship. And then I forgot about, our other brother, Ed. We had that Half.com business where we would take the discard. You probably didn't know this. This was before you. So we would take the discarded textbooks that were left at the school store in a little box, and we would sell them on Half.com, which is, was sold to eBay. It no longer exists, I don't think. But so we made some money doing that too.
Oh my gosh, I wish you guys would have continued doing that.
Which a lot of people have made a lot of money doing that these days.
That's a really great idea.
So after college, then I think mom and dad a lot of the times were trying to push me into something very stable. I had thought about going into real estate with dad and stuff like that, but they were always like, "No, Aaron, you should go work for Mayo. Go work for Mayo." And so I was like, "Okay, well." So I ended up doing a mentorship the summer before my senior year in college with Mayo in research finance. So I got my foot in the door there. It was interesting, I think, for me because my brain works in a way that I'm always trying to take in information and stuff like that. So got to learn about a lot of the research that was going on, and we supported the research from a financial role. And so after college, I was like, well, okay, what do I do? Right before I got the job at Mayo, I ended up helping open up a restaurant called Avocados, where Hot Chip is now.
Yeah.
And I always loved the restaurant business. I always loved to cook. That was another one of my many interests. And so I started there. as a server, and then eventually got the job at Mayo not too long after that in research finance. Thought I'd give it a shot. Nice stable job, benefits, all that, everything that everybody wants, right? But as an entrepreneur, deep down inside, you're kind of like, this isn't really the right fit for me.
Yeah.
I gave it a go for, I think it was like ended up being 5 years.
Yeah.
Wasn't real happy. The cubicle life, doing the same thing day in, day out for someone with an entrepreneurial mind is just not the right fit. So it happened to be, around 2008, 2009, I don't know, somewhere around that time, the recession had hit. Mayo was kind of trying to look to cut back in non-essential areas, and they ended up offering severance packages to people who wanted to voluntarily leave. And so I jumped on board. I said, perfect. And about the same time, John Hardys BBQ, which is what I'm currently running, the owner ended up passing away. And this other opportunity kind of came about rather quickly. And before I left my job at Mayo, I ended up working at John Hardys just like 1 day a week. So I cut my FTE down and started learning the restaurant business. Now, you remember Grandpa was in the restaurant business, Pompeian Chicken Roost. And I love to cook, right? So I was thinking, okay, this might be really good. I mean, we grew up eating at John Hardys.
Oh, yeah.
Dad was a partner in John Hardys for many
parties
years.
there. Man, I remember that.
So I knew the business, knew it was a great business. I was like, let's go, let's do this. And so I ended up leaving Mayo, I think in the spring of 2013, and started as basically a manager at John Hardys for a good 2 years or so, learning the ins and outs of the business. And, what Dad did so well, Dad didn't want to have anything to do with really the operational part of the business, but he brought in operating people, my partners, Dave and Red, Dave being the guru of restaurants, being in the restaurant industry for most of his entire life, running 12 Perkins franchises at one point. And then Red being a partner in Rochester Meats. So he knows the meat side of the business. Yeah. So, I mean, Dad put together a really great team.
Yeah.
Some people I could, certainly learn from.
Yeah.
And then, just being in the restaurant day in, day out. Certainly, learning from the long-term managers that have been there. I took everything in as I could, and Dave taught me, high-level management stuff. And that's what I've been doing since. I mean, certainly a lot has happened in the last couple of years with the pandemic, and but it's been a wild ride. It's been a much better fit for me as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, with that, right, being a business owner, there comes challenges in themselves, right? But I mean, I could definitely tell, Aaron and I were roommates for, I'm trying to think how many years, until Aaron got married, and then he kicked me out, and I had to move next door, not very far away.
Kind of roommates, yeah.
Aaron and I, just for everybody out there, we had shared a bedroom since we were probably, I was probably in, Ed moved into his room when he was, I think, in 8th or 9th grade, so I would have been probably in the 4th or 5th grade, where Aaron and I, we actually had bunk beds up until I think I went into high school, which is kind of funny. It's kind of like the stepbrother kind of scenario.
Totally.
But Aaron and I have been roommates for a long time, and then we bought a duplex together, and we're roommates until Aaron got married to Helen. Let's talk a little bit about Aaron. Being a young business owner, an entrepreneur. What are some of the challenges, and we could be even specific to like restaurant, but what have been some of the challenges that you have seen, being young and you've had some training, I would say, educationally, right, with reading books and having your degree and stuff, but it's a whole different beast when you're actually in the business running it. So what are some of the challenges that you found, not only in the business, but just with, I think, family life as well, because I think that's something that people struggle with.
Yeah, totally. Like a lot of people know, whether you're in the restaurant business or not, it's a night and day venture, right?
You're always on call.
Always
right?
involved, always on call. And I think early on for me, that was kind of the biggest thing. It's because when you're the top guy, right? Everyone's going to call you for whatever the issue is, even something they can take care of, right? For me, it was like trying to instill in my my managers that, I trust that you can take care of this instead of me doing everything, because I think I've gotten myself into trouble over the last couple of years where I would just take on things just because, or maybe because I don't like conflict, like don't like delegating. Sometimes it's like easier to do it yourself, but you realize, crap, I've got all these more important things that I need to be doing to run the business, and I'm spending my time doing piddly things that my managers could be doing. So, that's one of the challenges I think that I've had to deal with. And it's part of it's a personality thing too. I guess I'm more introverted than an extrovert, but I've learned to deal with them over time, I think, a little bit better. And I think you can.
Yeah, I mean, that's been really hard. Bucky and I just recently talked about, I would say in the last couple months, we need to start working on the business, not in the business, right? Because that's something that I myself has struggled with big time. And I'm very much like you. Obviously, we're cut from the same cloth. I think we take on a lot of this stress and these things, and we think that we should just do them whether it's to avoid conflict or maybe it's a control thing, whatever it might be. But I think what you said, Aaron, is that I would agree with it. It's something that I need to work on, and I definitely have looked to you and your experience, because you've done it very well, is empowering those around you to kind of have that autonomy. And obviously you're there to put them in check if it's not being done correctly, or you could see it. I don't even want to say necessarily done correctly, but just ways to improve it. But what that does is it just empowers your employees and your managers and whomever to like do their job and do it well. Yep. And I think that just helps out. In my opinion, culturally, it just helps out, because nobody wants to be a micromanager.
Right, correct.
And we don't want to be micromanagers.
I was going to say the same thing.
I hate being a micromanager. Like, that's like the worst thing to me ever. Like, if I'm a micromanager, like, oh God, that's not who I am.
Right.
Like,
I hate being micromanaged, so I don't want to do that to other people,
Exactly.
But there's some aspects of the restaurant business that you kind of have to micromanage.
Yeah, of course.
It's a low margin business, so you have to watch
cost,
everything,
labor,
which a lot of people don't really understand.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. I mean, for sure.
Yeah. And so, like, speaking of balance, I think a follow-up question is, when you're in your own business, we grew up with Dad being in several businesses. And I remember Dad told me, and I'm sure he told you too, like, and I didn't listen. Sorry, Dad. He said, Nick, don't do what I did. He goes, I did a lot of things. I did hotels, restaurant, real estate. He goes, but I never did any of them like really, really well. Like, he said, focus on one thing and be like the best at it. He goes, I don't care what it is. But it's hard to do with the way that our minds work, right?
Yep.
Because I know that you have a million ideas, Aaron. You're the man with a million ideas, and a lot of them are like, it's like, holy cow, like these are sweet ideas. So how have you managed that as well? Because like we always have things in the back, like I want to do this, or I want to do this, or how have you been able to kind of stay focused and on that path? Like what are the things that have driven you to do that? Knowing that, yeah, this isn't forever, right? Like that's the way I kind of view some of these things. Is like, well, it's not necessarily a forever thing. It's just right now I can't do all these things.
Yeah, good question. I mean, it's something I struggle with every day. And I think it's been a struggle for me, for the last, for as long as I've been in a job, I guess, or running something. Focus, right?
Yeah,
focus.
Yeah.
I always, it's like you have your family, you have business. So it's a hard balancing act.
Yeah. And how do you separate those things?
It's
hard, right?
So when I'm at work, right?
Yeah.
And I try not to look at my phone if Helen's texting me, but it's like when I'm there, I'm working, trying to set the right example for my employees, all that. But I'm at home too. Unless it's an emergency, I'm not going to answer my phone. I always tell my people, you can leave a message for me and I will check my message. And I think that's the biggest thing to try to help with that balancing act, especially when you're at home. You're a business person, you're invested 100% in that business, but you also have to have time for your family and be present with them, while you're home. And that's been a struggle. Phones are a big distraction. Oh, yeah. They always can be, whether it's business or pleasure. But I've learned, try to keep that in your back pocket, and pay attention to those around you, because you don't have a lot of time with them. It's always heartbreaking when you walk out the door and, Will, who's almost 2 years old, Daddy, runs after me and starts crying when the door shuts behind, you know. But you try to make the best time with them when you have the time to do it. So,
and I think that's really good advice, Aaron. And I'm not just saying this because I love you and you're my brother, but that's something that I've really struggled with. And with Rochelle, Rochelle has a very high intense job, but when she's able to go home, she's able to go home.
Yep.
And it's kind of like what you said, like the way that I've kind of tried to make an analogy for Rochelle is, Rochelle, when she's on call, it's, she's in the hospital, she's on call. Think of that, but all the time, right? Like there is no break.
Yep.
But you can do it, right? It's trying to figure out how to do it. And I think you've done a really nice job, and something that I would love to continue to talk to you about just outside of this, on how to, I don't want to set up, barrier is not, that's a negative word in this way, but how do you've done a great job of communicating that with your staff on, hey guys and gals, like when I'm at home, so leave me a message. Like, that's really awesome to kind of set up those expectations and those things. And I think that's really important because, in my opinion, it's too easy to get burned out doing this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, I'm sure you have felt it, Aaron. I know certainly I have felt it. Like, you feel like you're being pulled in a million different directions, and it's like, oh my gosh, like, how can I continue to do this? And, for me, it's the family is obviously what's pushing me to continue to do this.
Yep.
My partners are continuing to push me to do this. And for me, it's something a lot bigger. It's my purpose in this it's not so much money. Obviously, we need money to survive and to do things, right? But it's kind of like what Dad, I think, has taught us, is leaving a legacy, right? What's going to be your legacy? That is truly my driving point. And I don't necessarily know what that means. I think it's how can we impact and help the most people that we can. That's kind of like what I want to do, right?
Yep.
I want to build, I told Rochelle, together we want to build a legacy of hope and love. And that could mean a bunch of different things. So, but it's so hard to oftentimes separate those things when, like you said, we're so engrossed. We're on call 24/7. I mean, Aaron, I remember it was Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, maybe. You remember when we went to Hardys BBQ, the north one, and we loaded up the meat in the smoker?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was really cool. Like, I loved that. Like, it was so cool. But I literally went with my brother. I think it was Christmas Day
I think
night.
Cousin Paul was with us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Our cousin from California. And like, we literally, like, it was kind of cool. Aaron kind of gave me a rundown on, putting the rub on, the ribs and the pork and stuff. And then we loaded up the smoker for the next day. So, but you've done, and I commend you for this. And like I said, I would love to talk to you more about this just outside of this, on how you're able to set up those, hey guys and gals, like when I'm home, I'm home. When I'm at work, because I personally feel that's one of the hardest things for not even young, just people in business in general to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, Aaron, family is the most important thing. We were raised that way. It is, it's the most important thing. So, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's a struggle that a lot of people have.
Absolutely. Yep. Well, and I think a lot of, people lose sight of their marriage, of their family, because like the driving force is money. And like you said, it's not all about money. Money makes the world go round. Money lets you go on vacation. Money, buys you nice things.
It's a necessary
but for
thing.
me, it's like, I've always been one to say, okay, I want to be able to provide a similar lifestyle for my family that our parents provided for us. So whatever it takes to get there is that's how I'm going to, go about it.
Right.
And I don't have to be ultra wealthy or anything like that.
But you want to be able to go on the vacations like we did, right? Like
right.
we went to, I think I was talking to Mom about this the other day. We went to Disney World. I think it was every 2 years, right? But it's like stuff like that, right? Like you want to be able to go on a driving vacation and another vacation like we did, right? It was nothing extravagant, Aaron.
No.
It wasn't. But we were cared for, and we were able to go on those vacations. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing, right? Like that's one of my biggest memories is when we would go on we had this like this Astro van. I think that's what they called
conversion van
with like a VHS. And we would usually go, I think typically to Michigan, I think, because that's where all our dad's family was. And our grandpa was there in the summers, and our aunt lived there, and all my dad's cousins and stuff. And so that's typically where we'd go for road trips. But it's like doing stuff like that. And then going to like what we considered a big trip. And it was usually Florida, once again, because we had family down there. We like going to the beach and things like that. I agree. It was living a comfortable lifestyle. Once again, it wasn't lavish, but it was comfortable, right? Like we were cared for.
Yep.
And we were able to do things, and it was great. Yep. And I agree with you, Aaron. It's so no, I think you make some like really valid and wonderful points. And let's just talk a little bit about the restaurant business itself, because that's got to be hard. Hospitality in general is difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean, running hotels, it's similar.
Yeah, it is. It's very similar. And so let's like maybe talk a little bit about, I would say, the history of John Hardy's. I think not a lot of people know the history about John Hardy's. Mm-hmm. So if we can kind of touch on that, and then just kind of talk about what your day-to-day looks like in running a couple of restaurants.
Yeah. Rochester Women's Blog actually wrote a really great article, I think last year for Black History Month, about John Hardy. A lot of stuff I actually didn't really even know. So it was really cool. The writer, she ended up interviewing John's daughter, who lives up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And then John's wife, actually, who's still alive. I think she lives in the Albert Lee area.
Oh, cool.
So John himself was born, I think, it must have been the 1920s, maybe 1930. From Alabama, moved up to Buffalo, New York, to work in a steel mill, I think, or a foundry of some sort. Ended up having an eye injury, and so he ended up. Well, he wanted to travel. He knew that, so he went and visited his sister, who lived in Minneapolis or St. Paul at the time, and her husband, Ted Cook, opened up a barbecue joint called Ted Cook's 19th Hole. Still exists. I think his family still runs it. That's where John ended up learning how to barbecue in the first place. And so after being there for a year or two or however long it was, he decided he wanted to open up his own barbecue joint, but he wasn't sure where. He thought Duluth. But then he heard about Rochester and its growing population at the time. This is like late 60s, early 70s. Obviously Mayo was really growing. It's about the same time that Dad actually
probably came to Rochester.
Yeah. So he ended up moving to Rochester, liked what he saw, and opened up a small shack on 3rd Avenue Southeast by the fairgrounds. It was literally like basically one room with a counter where he served out of, and it had an open smoker in the back behind him, and he actually had his sauces in crock pots to keep them warm. So it's funny. Here's a funny story about that is that for the longest time, customers have been coming to eat at John Hardy's since it opened back on 3rd Avenue. And there was an elderly woman, I can't remember her name now, but she would come with her husband every so often, and always wanted the sauce heated up. And I was like, that is so strange. Why? Well, John kept it in crock pots. And it made sense, though. So when you put the meat on a plate, the meat would get cold pretty quickly. But if you put the hot, warm sauce on it, it would keep everything hot.
Yeah.
Well, you can't do that anymore. The health department doesn't allow it. But it was always funny when she would come in and ask for her sauce to be warmed up and put on her meat. And that's why. So anyway, so John started this business in 1972. Hear it all the time from customers coming in. There would be lines out the door, down the block. And you could smell his, the apple and cherry wood smoking and all that. Built a huge following. No one knew about barbecue really at the time. It wasn't really known in the Midwest here. And so it became very popular very quickly. John was a gregarious, tall, 6'2" guy. He played kind of a lot of tricks on people. Mm-hmm. He would put hot sauce when somebody went mild and watch the people sweat while eating it. If people have had like John
Hardy's sauce, the difference between mild and hot, it's hot. It's hot.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So anyway, John owned it up until he passed away in 1986. He eventually opened up the one on the West Frontage Road now.
Sure.
First, and then I think South Broadway was opened after that.
Yeah.
And he ended up passing away from cancer a vegetarian doing barbecue, by the way, which is always really kind of funny. He'd occasionally eat meat and fish, but very much so he was mostly a vegetarian. But anyway, so he passed away. His family ended up not being able to or didn't want to buy the business or continue it. And that's how, our family got into the business. Dad
didn't have any business. Like, obviously he had a business mindset and an entrepreneurial spirit, but Dad never ran a restaurant before.
No.
Grandpa did, right? But still.
But for a very short period
of time. Yeah, that's a whole nother story, which is kind of funny.
So yeah, Dad brought some business partners together and they bought the business and had run it for, I don't know,
2001, I think, or maybe
so probably 15 years.
Yeah, I think and then the one partner wanted it more than the others and bought them out.
Bought them all out. And Dad, it was always a headache for Dad, right? I mean, people steal. I mean, he had people selling the meat out the back door and then they opened a restaurant in Winona or something and using the meat from John Hardys. It's just crazy. So stuff like the restaurant business is hard, right? I mean, you have to watch everything. And I think part of the reason why it's important that I'm still there is that I can do that. Because it's easy to lose sight of it, right? Even if you have the best intentions, the best people that are working for you, it quickly can go downhill. And I think, which is what happened when, in 2012, we purchased the business and it was actually losing money and the sales were there. But it just wasn't being watched closely enough, for whatever reason. And now we've turned it around and it's doing really well. Since the pandemic, with a lot of businesses, your costs have just skyrocketed, right?
For sure.
Supply chain issues, labor issues, so the cost of labor has gone up, food costs have gone up, it's been challenging. Luckily for us, before the pandemic, we did 36% takeout, which is quite a bit higher than most restaurants. Restaurants probably would only do 5-10% takeout, if that.
So you're kind of ahead of the game already.
We were. So when the pandemic hit and we had to shut down dine-in business,
it didn't really hurt.
Turned in dial 100% was nothing for us.
Interesting.
I'm so fortunate, right? I mean, being in other restaurants that had to close down because they
were so reliant on.
What in the world? What do you do? So yeah, it's been a wild ride the last 3 years. Things are getting better, I think. But some other initiatives that we took on during the pandemic was getting our sauce into Hy-Vee,
which is really cool. Yeah.
So now we're in 7 Hy-Vees in Southeast Minnesota, and hopefully going to get into more. Right now we produce all the sauce in house, so it's there's some challenges there.
Yeah.
With storage and all that. So you're looking into maybe doing a co-packer situation eventually, or having someone produce it for us, get it out of the restaurants. So that you can grow that business. So, it doesn't make you a lot of money, but everything helps and every little bit helps. So yeah, I mean,
that's awesome. So, we talk about initiatives, right? You're doing these things. What else do you foresee, I guess, for John Hardys? Is there expansion on the horizon? I know you talked a little bit about, hey, how do we get more of our sauces? So, your mind can go in a million different directions with that. But, what do you feel? What are your views on where you are going and John Hardys is going?
Yeah, I think the struggle for me is like with the business itself, with my mind, the way it works, always wanting new information. I won't say I've mastered the business, because there's always something new that you're going to learn in any business you're running, right? But I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I could almost do this with my eyes closed. Mm-hmm. Higher level stuff that my partner Dave takes care of. There's still things I need to learn, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I need a new challenge. And I think we've talked about this before about what a John Hardys 2.0 might look like.
Yeah, for sure.
I think even prior to the pandemic, you see a large segment of the restaurant industry kind of going towards more of a fast casual model. And I think right now with the way our business is set up, it lends itself pretty well to that.
Yeah.
Servers are great. I love, sitting down and getting waited on, stuff like that, but I don't think it's necessarily needed. Mm-hmm. So my whole thought process is, you could do a fast casual, 30 tables, much smaller footprint. Like you said, do a lot of, have a takeout window.
Yeah.
Do 2 of them maybe. I don't know. I just see with the takeout having really gone away, we're at 50% takeout right now. It's crazy, and it's stayed that consistent. So our dining business hasn't come back. People got used to eating takeout. Our food lends itself well to taking out. So for me, a future John Hardy's, that's what it would kind of look like. It would be more takeout, order at a counter, get your food, or sit down and get a number and have your food brought to you. I think you could become a regional chain with that sort of idea. So,
I love that idea because, the point of this, is real growth. So let's get into that a little bit. So Aaron, if you, in an ideal world, in what you would like to see with this business in particular, where do you see John Hardy's going in the next 10 to 15 years? I know we kind of talked about that a little bit, right? But
yeah, I mean,
are you saying, you said a regional player? What does that look like?
I mean, I think you could go, towns say 25,000 or more. I think we could be in northern Iowa, like the Mason City, La Crosse, Mankato, 10 units. Yeah. And franchising, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of people that reach out to us, to me and say, hey, I'd be interested in, if you ever franchised, let me know, kind of thing. The thing about John Hardy is that being in business for 50 years, you've touched a lot of people's lives, right? And you've built a reputation, a brand, recognizable brand, whether you like it or not. You recognize John Hardy's, right? So that's valuable.
Oh yeah.
I've struggled. I'm not gonna lie. I've struggled a lot going back and forth with myself whether I think there's longevity with the current model, right? I mean, there's always gonna be competition. There's always things that you could do differently that someone else is doing. But I think you try to stay true to the core, right? That makes up your the apple and cherry wood, how you do the sauce, the JoJo potatoes. You stick to that. That makes you, and the garlic bread. I should mention that too. Somebody that garlic bread is obsessed with. I mean, all of them are garlic bread obsessed.
Because you guys tried changing it, right? And it was a disaster, right?
Yeah, we changed the bread actually one or two times. One was out of necessity because the gingerbread house closed.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
people noticed it.
So those are like the things that make us famous. And I'm thinking, okay, so you take those core items, you
build around that,
and you build around it exactly. Yeah. And you're never gonna be the best to everybody, right? Yep. Barbecue is a very popular food item these days. Yep. There's a lot of, popular chefs doing it. We're not Chefy Barbecue. I don't want to be Chefy Barbecue. I don't think those two, they don't go together, Chefy and barbecue. No, it just doesn't fit, right?
People expect like a shack, right? Like when you think barbecue, that's what people think is like a shack,
exactly.
Right? And I know I've heard actually people say, oh gosh, I could never go to like a fancier barbecue place because that's not what barbecue is meant to be.
Yep.
I've heard people actually say that, which is kind of funny. So, okay. So we're talking expansion. We're talking multiple units. I love that idea. I know a good real estate guy that could probably help out with some of that stuff. But anyways, so that's on the business side, Aaron. What about on, a personal side? How have you seen yourself grow as a person? Now, obviously, I've seen it, so I have my opinion. But how have you seen yourself grow as a person throughout these last, whatever it's been, 11 years since you've been, you worked corporate, then you started doing some other things. So how have you seen yourself grow as a person, as an individual?
Yeah, I mean, I think all in all, like the inner core of me hasn't really changed, right? Yep. Things that you learn and the experience that you gain, for instance, like delegating, right?
That's the hardest thing.
Being a leader.
Yeah. And
that's hard for people who have never been in business before, who have never brought up in a business environment, truly understanding how to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't understand that at first. I had the mentality that a lot of first young managers have going into a business. I'm in charge. And not necessarily in a bad way, but it might come off in a bad way to your employees, right? Who is this new guy? I'm in charge. Do what I ask you to do. I'm going to stand around and just delegate tasks. It's not the right way to go about doing things. And it didn't take long for me to learn that, especially in a restaurant where it's constant work. It's not easy work. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's hot. Kitchens get hot. Yeah. It gets stressful. The phones are ringing all the time. For me, just to set the right example, right? To work, constantly be working. If I'm working, they're going to see that you're working. They're seeing that your boss is working, doing, I'd get on the ground and I'd clean stuff. I'll fill pint jars of sauce. I mean,
There's
I think
nothing
for
above
me,
you.
that's
Or
leadership.
below you, excuse me. There's nothing
Exactly.
below
Exactly.
you.
We're on
Yeah.
the same level. Yeah. I'm an owner. I have a different title than you, but I'm not better than you. And I think that goes a long way. And a lot of people don't really truly understand that. And you get a lot of business owners and managers that have the wrong attitude, and you wonder why turnover is the way it is. And you know, so it's just like, you have that golden rule, that respect thing, right? There's always going to be employees that aren't going to get that. They're not going to care.
No.
But you'll see a lot of people rise up around you if
Yeah.
you set the right example.
No, and I remember Dad saying that too, right? If you're gonna, he always told me, if you're gonna truly understand a business, you need to know everything about that business, right? And I remember my journey in the hotels, which, you know, that has changed quite a bit, but it's because we've been able to find people that can do those things. But I remember doing housekeeping. Oh my God, that was like literally like the hardest thing in the world. I remember, and I was like young. I must have been 23 years old, and Dad, I did housekeeping. I think it was like a month and a half. And I just remember I would go home just exhausted and like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. But it gives you an appreciation for what people do, right?
Yeah.
And it also allows you to understand that part of the business and like the hard work and what people go through. And it really makes you appreciate them. And so, and like you said, people see that and they're like, wow, this guy isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. I remember when we were doing the Fairfield too, in order to help save money, I was scrubbing putty off the floors to get the place ready to save money. I remember Herschel and I would be in there till 10 o'clock at night, and it was August and there was no air. It was horrible. I was sweating. Like, it was horrible. Yeah. I mean, I was
sweating,
dirty. Yeah, me sweating. Yeah, I sweat in general, just at baseline. But I think there's something to that, Aaron. And I think that's really cool. And not that, and I think like you and I both know that some of these things we're not going to be doing forever, because that's not where we're best fit, right?
Correct, yeah.
But for the time being, there are sacrifices that have to be made until you can create and build that team and that trust where you can start stepping away from that, right?
Yep.
And I think you and I are both in a position, and like I said, Bucky and I have talked about this too, about starting to zoom out a little bit more and looking at the business in its entirety.
Looking at the bigger picture.
The bigger picture. And we're still young, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like the crazy thing too, is like you look at people being in these positions and still we haven't even hit our prime yet in our working years when you think about it, right?
Right.
And so I don't know if it's a comfort thing, but I guess for me, that's what I keep telling myself is, good God, like you still have time to figure this out, right? And it's not going to be like this forever. But it's really fun, right? Mm-hmm. And with what I found is, no matter like what the stresses are, I personally couldn't see myself doing anything else. Like, I've thought about this, and I know you have too.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like, yeah, you have your frustrations and stuff, but then when you actually like sit down and think about it, at least for me, it's like, yeah, but what else would I do? Because I can't work for anybody else. I can't. I haven't done it in the capacity that you have, but I have worked for other people, and it just wasn't for me.
When you're not wired like that, it's like, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, when you got that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, this is like been really awesome. And I think there's just a lot of value, in general to what we've been discussing. So, I think we're getting to pretty much our time here. Aaron, what are some things that I think you could tell people that are listening that are, I don't know, either thinking about, because you've experienced everything, thinking about maybe leaving a job. It doesn't have to be corporate, but a job, right? And starting their own business. Or someone who's just like not sure what they're going to do, because you've had a lot of different ideas. Like what kind of things would you tell people that are kind of in that limbo, trying to figure out what they want to do or where they're going with their life?
I guess don't think too hard about it. Especially for me. I mean, like I go back and forth with all my other ideas and stuff like that. Just going all in, I mean, you hear about these side hustle gigs all the time, but I just read something the other day about like lot of the, recommendations from business people are that just do it, right? It's like the guy who started Vuori, the athletic company.
Yeah.
He had Vuori as a side hustle, and he was an accountant, I guess, at the time, and he couldn't commit the time to that he needed to do, and it's scary, right? I mean, to go off. I was fortunate where I got into an already established business was John Hardys, right?
Sure.
But I think save up your money, don't go buy that Starbucks latte like they always say, be wary of your spending, and then build up a cash, an emergency fund, and then go for it. You got a great idea. It doesn't hurt anything, right? Yeah. Especially the young people. I got kids now. I can't really, it's hard for me to just kind of jump away from what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Because I have to, I got to watch those kids. Not that I couldn't figure out and pivot to something else. But yeah, as an entrepreneur, it's always scary, right? There's no given. John Hardy's established, but tomorrow is never a given, right?
Yeah.
You could have a fire, you could lose $1 billion. Then what, right? I mean, luckily we have 2, but they're small restaurants, they can only do so much business. I think the biggest thing is just do it.
Just do it. Yeah,
right? There's never going to be a good time.
I appreciate this because this is very relevant in my own personal life with the business. You and I know we worry. We think a lot. Like you said, don't overthink. And I'm trying so hard. And I think Bucky and Dylan, I hope they listen to this one. Because I will self-admit that I do a lot of self-sabotage, and I overthink things. And, I know we've talked about this. People that follow Realty Growth know that we had this huge announcement that we're building a building, and we've been talking about this for like 5 years, and we're finally doing it. And kind of to your point of just do it. Like, there's never going to be a right or wrong time. You're exactly right. And if you're prepared for the ups and downs, and you have the right partners and the support, just do it.
Yeah, you got all the pieces in place,
right?
Yeah,
and
of course.
There's always risk to anything, and I really appreciate that because I know I've told Bucky and Dylan and Rochelle too. I need to be continuously told that.
Yep.
Because it is scary, and especially like you said, you have a family. I have one. The second one is coming here, supposed to be in like 4 days, excuse me now, and that's scary because it's like, oh my gosh, like what should I be doing this now? And I think the answer is if you're prepared to weather the storm and you have the ability to weather those times, absolutely yes. Do it, right?
And there's other opportunities out there too. If you fail, try something else. We're lucky in that we have college degrees. We could do something else if we had to. I could always go back to Mayo, but would I be happy at the end of the day? I mean, you have to be happy doing what you do. And that's another thing, right? I mean, if you're not happy, then you're not going to give 100%. You're not going to, continue to want to do it. And what's the point then?
Right. And that could trickle down to family stuff, friendship
Correct.
stuff, right?
Yep. It affects everything.
What anybody wants, right? I mean, it's a really difficult thing, and you don't want to have to bring those things home to things that are otherwise stable and things that you really enjoy.
And I look at what Dad would always say, or Mom even. Dad would always leave as hard as it was, he would leave his work at work.
Yeah. Because he loved.
I mean, that's amazing. Because I don't ever really remember a time where Dad, he'd be on the phone or he'd go to the Brentwood on Saturdays, and we'd go with him and stuff. But yeah, he did an amazing job of being there.
He was able to dissociate himself from that really well.
Yep.
Really well. And gosh, it's hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard.
He always would say, I don't know how I did it. I just did it, and
did it.
Mom's motto, just do it. Nike, you can hear her always say that, just do it.
If Mom could have trademarked that prior to Nike. I'm just curious. I don't know, maybe not, but gosh. But anyways.
Yeah.
Well, I think our time is about up here, Aaron. Really appreciate the time and the insight. I really do think this conversation is very valuable. Not only to hopefully everybody that listens and watches this, but to me personally, I think it's nice to know that, there's a lot of people that do this, but I have an older brother who I look up to who is doing this too and is in the trenches every day, much like I am. So, before we go, do you have any final thoughts or plugs for John Hardys or anything like that?
Plugs for John Hardys. The sauce is everything.
Nice, yeah.
This has been great, Nick. I don't like being in the spotlight, as you know, like kind of like Dad, but no, this has been fun.
Yeah,
I always like talking business with you.
Yeah, so. It's awesome, and hopefully it's pretty comfortable, and I know this probably turned out awesome, and I'm sure we're gonna get some nice hits on this. So,
yeah, no, it's great. Glad to be a part.
Once again, appreciate it so much. If there's any other questions, or you can always reach out to me. You can reach out to my brother. Go visit my brother at John Hardys BBQ. You will see him in the kitchen. You'll see him out front. You'll see him scrubbing toilets occasionally. So just give a shout out, support local, because that's what we do, and that's the way to continue keeping our community strong. So I believe that's a wrap for this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Real Growth Podcast. Peace.